Hello, welcome to another episode of The Caring Instinct. We're here with Julieta, who is over in Michigan. Am I right?
Yes.
Julieta is an unschooling and world schooling mum of 2 boys. We're excited to get to know about it. I think you started during the pandemic, right?
Yes. So it was officially, I always wanted a world school, because I'm a flight attendant for a major U.S. airline. So traveling is always in our lives, and I wanted to do that. But when the pandemic hit, we kind of went into the homeschooling, the traditional homeschool route, and then we quickly transitioned into unschooling. So it's been, I want to say maybe about from 2020, the end of 2020, and then until now. And it has been a beautiful, a growing journey. I have grown a lot. I have learned a lot. So I'm really happy to share the experience. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So what's your why? Why did you decide to do it?
It's such a great question. During the pandemic, when I went deep into homeschooling, right? I bought almost $10,000 worth of curriculum and books, and it just kept coming, right? And I felt like it was Christmas. It was so nice. But then I realized that my oldest son, who was at the time going into first grade, what would have been first grade, I realized we weren't connected. Sure, we spent a lot of time together, but he was going to a traditional school. So we were not connected. We would do in the traditional homeschooling, he would say, I'm like, okay, well, let's do this like math curriculum. And he would be like, well, you're not my teacher. I'm like, what do you mean? So we went through the learning period that I wanted to connect with him. That connection was more important than any curriculum. And as I dove deeper into that, I realized that was the why I wanted to give them choices and to see them as equals, because back then it was about what I wanted. If you notice, there's a lot of I at the beginning, because I wasn't seeing them or seeing him per se. My youngest one was still very little. I wasn't seeing him for the person of who he is. And it was just about me. I wanted to set my expectations, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to share that with him, and I wanted to do everything that I didn't get to do. I wanted to do that with him. But he was not interested in all of it. And I realized for me to see that, to grow that connection, we kind of had to do it a different way. So, yeah.
How easy was it to drop the what I want and
it really it wasn't as easy as I thought, and there was a lot of stuff that came from my past, the relationship I had with my parents and stuff like that, and I didn't really wanted to look into that, right? I've said in the past, like, there's a reason why I didn't work through that, because it's not always good stuff, right? So I had to open up and understand, see myself as in the work that I needed to do for myself, and just not put that on my children, right? That it was stuff that I had to work through. Like the expectations, what education is like, the video games, one of your last podcasts about the video games with Ash, I'm like, yes, it was so many yeses on that, because I had to let go and work on myself, so yeah, it's always an ongoing process. It wasn't, it was good though, but it was hard. Yeah.
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 Oh, for all of us, isn't it? When you were talking about this is what I want, this is what I expect of my child in terms of the curriculum, this is you as a mother, but it could very easily, and it is very easily, the school system, because most of the time where the sort of state education comes from is where we want to see our children, and it sometimes goes in a completely different direction from what the child development science would tell us, or what observing each particular child would tell us. So that this I I expect as a parent, this very much gets generalized onto the school system, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I feel like, when you start into this journey of like unschooling is generally seen as as a modality of homeschooling, so we tend to try to bring that curriculum, those expectations that the school system has into the home. And then when you mix those dynamics, we definitely lose when you mix the dynamics of what the school wants and what you want as a parent. It is very hard to see them as the people that they are, and we tend to lose. Like if for example, if your child wanted to do art, we don't see art as the educational thing that we would like to see, right? Like reading or doing a math problem, but there is all of that involved. Like learning per se doesn't stop because you're drawing a picture. It doesn't stop because you're just taking a walk in nature. It's all embedded in that. But we try to divide all the subjects, like 30 minutes. I remember our routine was 30 minutes language arts, right? And then quickly switch to math, and then quickly switch to art, and quickly switch to Spanish, and quickly switch to this. And he was not done with any of it, and I was just like, oh, no, but we had to do, it was about me checking off those boxes at the end of the day. So
have you heard of Ken Robinson?
yes.
Yeah.
So
he does the famous thing where he says if you took the school model and took it to a business, they would laugh at you. If you said, I want all your employees to go to one room and do something just like you say for 30 minutes, then forget what you're doing, and then go to the accountant and do accounts with that, and then forget what you're doing. They say no, it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work though, and it's not that I'm anti-school per se, but it's just the way some of the things that are done. Half the time they don't get the time, and I think this is one of our biggest realizations in the last couple of weeks for my husband and I, is the time that we get to process our own experiences in the school system, and how we get that time to think about them, to think, to talk, and then to connect with our children, because we share all of that. It's like exposure to anything. Like we talk about, I don't know, all kinds of things. So it's like you're starting a project and all of a sudden you have to leave that behind because you have to do something else. So you don't get that that leisure of working and growing and troubleshooting if you're trying to make something, right? So his book is, I have that, and it's part of my unschooling support library that I have going on. His book is one of the first ones that I bought. So
yeah, which one? What's it called?
I think it's called Creative Schools.
Creative Schools.
Yeah.
So what have some of your favorite projects been recently?
Finding out. So we went to Texas for a little while. Traveling, it's a big part of our life right now. The boys, I feel like we're in a very unique transition of our lifestyle, because we use technology, and the boys are starting to say what they need a little bit more, right? Like they want to swim a little bit more. So we're working on facilitating those opportunities for them. So I think our time in Michigan is going to be a little bit more permanent, instead of like getting up and go, which is what I like. So we're working on that, and just trying to connect with other people and sharing, if they want to, if they're ready, what this life could mean for them, because I understand it's not always possible, especially for the time aspect, as a parent, unschooling or homeschooling, someone has to be there with them. And it's not on parenting per se, where they're just like, oh yeah, do your own thing. It's a lot of work on ourselves to facilitate, to provide, and to make sure that we're all making sure everyone's needs are met. So I think working on that, and just YouTube videos, random stuff.
Yeah.
I move through change a lot, so very quickly. So my projects are, one day I'm building a library, and then next day, like today, we're redoing, remodeling a bedroom. And he went from painting to like breaking walls. So that's what my husband is doing right now. So yeah, so everything is, we're always busy. We're always doing something. So.
And I have a
That
question
kind
about
of
the word unschooling as well. A lot of people haven't heard the term.
Okay.
And it's also very alarming word to hear. For a lot of people go, what? You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your experience of?
So when I started, so unschooling, it was a term coined by John Holt, and he's a very important aspect of the movement because he was actually a teacher, and he observed his students, and he wrote, how children fail. He wrote how children learn. So they're like staples of this movement per se, and the need for a different, like Ken Robinson would say, creative schools, right? So, and he didn't use it. He just used the term like without school. So it came like unschooling. He kind of stuck with it. But I've always find it, and you're right. It brings people fear when you say it, and then you go. There's a lot of other people that have used the term radical unschooling because it goes beyond the education aspect of it. So I guess that John Holt coined that term, but it really is it's just life without, when I try to define unschooling for us, to me, what it means is just learning through life. And that's it, really, making those tangible connections. When one of the last times we were at the airports, we talked about kidneys, we talked about sodas, we talked about why the sugar in the soda is damaging for the kidney. And my dad had a kidney transplant, so all of that got into it. So if you try to segregate the experience by subjects, you hit all of them. Like you hit the math, you hit the science, you hit the language arts, you hit all of them. But it wasn't in an abstract type of way. And, it becomes something tangible, something that they can remember, and then they can add on to it. So, but I can see how it seems scary for people. That's why I call it the unschooling lifestyle, my website and stuff, because for us, it became a lifestyle of just sharing with them, and really going at our own pace and their own pace, just like everyone is just as important. I'm not more important because I'm the mom, and they're not more important because they're the children, right? Everyone it's equal.
That is so interesting.
Yes. Have you guys ever heard the term? So I know there's a lot of people like play, like play is big in the UK, free yards for free play and stuff like that. Is it unschooling not that much, or?
Well, I have a bit more experience because I used to work in a Sudbury school here.
Yeah.
And a lot of the families came from unschooling, and they went to the Sudbury school, which is a democratic school where you have quite a few in America. I don't know if you have any in Michigan.
Yeah, so that's a very, very good point. So they're mostly in Massachusetts. There's one here in Michigan that is very closer to that. It's called Conlara, and it's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Yeah, but they're like about 45 minutes away from us. I know somebody tried to start an Agile Learning Center, an ALC, which is kind of like the same concept. But it didn't really take on. I was having a conversation with another friend of mine who is also unschooling, and we're trying to figure out why is that. Is it the timing, perhaps? Is this our region? Are we in the wrong state? I don't really know. But
it's hard work to set them up and to keep them going.
Yeah,
you're swimming upstream.
The lack of funding,
Mm-hmm.
the lack of awareness.
And here, I mean, even schools that are funded here, the mainstream schools don't have much money as well, so schools that aren't funded.
It's very hard. And I think here in Michigan it's the same. And I think the ALC center that I'm talking about, because we try to integrate into that, and that was one of the reasons that it closed. It was because of funds. So so it's very but there's always new opportunities. So we're always looking for just to connect with like-minded people. When you go into unschooling and you tell people, I don't usually tell people right off the bat what we do, because they're like, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never be with my children all day. And I'm like, well, so sometimes it's hard to explain. If they're not ready for it, then it's okay. You have to do what works for you, and that's what unschooling. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just making sure that your family values are represented, and the connection, that's probably my biggest gain from this lifestyle. So that's what I like to advocate the most, I guess. So.
And it's worked, has it, for the connection? How's your connection?
Oh my goodness, yes. It's, how do I explain it? So I call them rhythms, right? We are very aware of how I say things, because if something is bothering me, I say why it's bothering me, per se, me, Julieta, the person. And I don't say, well, this is bothering me because you're doing it. So I'm very aware of what's happening on my end, right? So I don't put that on them, so they don't think that that they have done something wrong when I'm the one that perhaps I'm just tired or didn't have enough coffee or something like that. So we can say that to each other. And my oldest is very, if he has a question like, are you mad? Are you upset? I'm like, no, I'm just thinking about this. He's like, oh, I thought you were mad. I'm like, no, why would I be? So it's making sure that we get clarity on everything that we're doing. And we don't, everything is kind of slower sometimes in our house. We take time to get out, we talk about the leaves, we talk about the sticks, it's just, that's really the beauty of it. So we are definitely not in the run, get up, let's go, get in the car, get out of the car, let's do this, so yeah, it has helped.
That's beautiful. I'm curious, when you said there's more equality. Children are not more important than parents. Parents are not more important than children. Could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, that was something that I learned. Like, not that I never thought that children weren't important, but there was something in my upbringing that made me think that that they had to do what I had in store for them, right? And if you think about it, like our children, when they're toddlers, they get to eat what we make for them. They get to go wherever we say that they go. They get to wear the clothes that we pick for them. They have really no choice. They have really no choices there. And I just thought that's the way it was supposed to be. And then I just slowly realized that that if I was able to pay attention, that they would tell me what they needed, in different ways, right? And as I'm like, not because they're younger means that they sure have less experience than what we do, because what we have on them, and really the only thing we have on them, is that we have been on this world a little bit longer than they have. So we have our own experience, but they are just as smart, they're just as capable, if not probably more, to learn something new, to be faster at it. So I just had to stop seeing them as just my children, right? But there's that person that is interested in some things that I may not be interested in, and that's okay. Just like I would respect, if you tell me you liked, I don't know, black licorice, for example, I'm like, oh, good for you. I don't like it. I had it once actually, and I just couldn't take the taste, So it's the same thing. I wouldn't be like, oh, why do you like that? Coming from judgment. That's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, is not coming from judgment. So they're just smaller people, and my youngest son really, really taught me that he knows what he wants, like, without a doubt. There's no going back from that. So yeah.
Did you feel there's no room for that at school?
That's a great question. As we progress into our journey, my oldest started to say he couldn't say that he was bored at the school that he was previously at, and he would say that if he said that if he was bored, they would say, well, there's always something to do. We only had that experience, so I can't speak for all, but just my own experience. I feel like there was an illusion of choice and an illusion of treating them as, like individuals. But I feel that it fell within the boundaries that were comfortable for them. Because sometimes when you're in this lifestyle, it's sometimes things get uncomfortable because gaming is a big one, for them to game and to utilize their time to do that. That's uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me at the beginning. I was one of those that I'm like, I'm going to hide the iPad, and there's no iPad, and there's all this kinds of like punishment for no reason. So I think there was some of it, I'm not saying that it's, from our own experience, that's what I can tell you. I'm not sure, maybe people have different experience. Everyone's different, right? It's about their choice. So if they come and tell me right now that they want to go back to school, I'll be like, okay, sure. Let's work together to facilitate that and make that happen for you. How can I best help you to do what you want to do?
Do you think they're going to?
I was just going to say the same thing.
Are they content?
Maybe. I think are you familiar with human design at all?
No.
No, it's kind of like, in human design, it's kind of like astrology type thing. But one of the things that I have noticed is that my husband and I, we like to be alone sometimes. Like, we are very like content. We need our personal space. But the boys are a little bit, they like to be more active and, more active with their peers. So maybe they will. We are very active. And I think that's one of the concerns too with us homeschooling or unschooling. It's about the socialization. But we are very active, but maybe they need a little bit more. So, but the problem that I'm seeing right now is that they need that freedom, but there are no spaces here for that. Like, so my oldest one is 9. If I want him to really interact with his peers, like with freedom and support, there are really nothing. Everything else, like sports, people see sports, extracurriculars as part of, socialization, but everything has an instruction type of model.
And they need to be climbing trees and building forts on their own. I mean, not with peers, but without being told what to do.
Exactly. And I haven't found that. There's a place in New York, it's called The Yard, Playground NYC, and we have been there, and that's kind of like what I would love for them to have, to just really be free. But I'm still looking for that. So, there's a few options. Like I said, I think we're going to look at Clone Lara just to tour, just to see what they offer. But I don't know if they will like it. But if they say, sure, let's try this, I wouldn't be opposed to it. No, it's all about giving them what they need and their choice. It's I may not be all content there because I like waking up late. I don't like waking up at dark 100 to drive them, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world, at least for me though.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed about the working with self-directed children is that they tend to find the passion for what they do like in life easier just because they have space to explore and really go into depth with things. So I'm just your children are still young, but do you have a sense of there's things they're really heading towards? Are they still exploring, or do they
love to explore a lot? We definitely love to explore a lot. My oldest has a very good way of researching. And those research skills have come from gaming. He's very good at research. He's very observant. I've always said he was going to be an actuary because he's a very good assessor of risk. Like, do you think something's going to happen to me if I throw myself from this? I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you think are the possibilities of that, of you breaking a leg? And he's like, I don't know, maybe none. I'm like, yeah, probably none. So, he's very aware of risk. So he assesses risk a lot. So I think, I don't know, I've always said that. He's very good with animals. He rides horses. So I think something along that path. And my youngest one, I don't know. I think baseball is in his future. He likes
Yeah.
that a lot, but he's still, like you said, he's still really young. So we just ask them what they want to experience. If they say yes, we'll do that. If they say no, that's okay. And then if it's something that I want to experience, then I'll say, we're going to do this because I really want to do it and I can't leave you home alone. So you're just going to have to tag along with me. And they're like, oh, okay. But it's, there again, it's the recognition that it's for me and that I'm not doing it because it's good for them or they may learn something. I'm recognizing that I'm doing it because I need that. So that's been hard sometimes.
And you
That-
coach a lot
go
of families, right? Unschooling families, and tell us a bit
Yeah.
about how that goes and what kind of the problems people encounter or making that
Yes.
step.
So I love doing that. Even when I started traditional homeschooling, there was a lot of stuff that I learned, from when I started. I'm like, oh, I wish I wouldn't had spent $10,000 on curriculum when I
Yeah.
first started homeschooling, right? I got rid of it all, like all of it, just, because it wasn't serving us. And I wanted to help that and share that with others. So if you're like homeschooling or thinking about unschooling, there's a kind of like a leap of faith there that it's going to work out, and then you're not going to like mess up your children, right? They say, a lot of people say, oh, I'm just afraid I'm gonna just go all wrong, and there really isn't a right or wrong way to do it. But I just gonna help you through that process of the deschooling aspect of it, and I help you see what the invitations, and a lot of people call them triggers, that you see when something happens, like if you're not seeing the educational aspect that we're used to seeing, that reading like at 100% or reading by age 6, or at least in the US, like by first grade they have to be reading like fully. And so I kind of help you see that from I'll give you a different lens, and then I provide tools, whether it's like different podcasts that I have gone through, and kind of help you navigate those fears with someone that I because I've been through those fears, and they don't go away per se, but they are more manageable nowadays. So, yeah.
Is there something that your children have learned later than they would have perhaps in school, like reading that you've?
I think the business aspect of, we have my husband's a builder, so we talk about, we have businesses, so we talk about that. We invite them to, partake in the conversations when we're making decisions. So I think that's a big aspect of it, but, riding horses probably was another one. What else I can say? I don't know, the traveling, we have, how to navigate the airports and how to be comfortable in those type of spaces, and just life really. I mean, those are probably those are the three pillars of our lifestyle. It's like the traveling, different experiences in our businesses. Yeah.
When people say to you, oh, I couldn't homeschool, unschool, I couldn't have my children around all the time. And obviously there are practical concerns. People might be working and haven't got the capacity. But if they could because of work, but they don't want to, what do you think? Why do you think? Why do you think you can do it now? And what's the variable here?
I think that's from the wounds that we have from our past. And I think it all revolves to childhood. Before I got pregnant with my son, with my oldest, I always said that I didn't want to have children, right? And I said that not because I didn't want them, but I was afraid. I really was afraid of having a little person in my care and not knowing if I was going to be good for them. I think at first it shows up as like, this like resistance. But if you stop and like sit with that resistance, and that's why I love unschooling, or, when you have the time to sit with that resistance and reflect on it. Is it because your needs are not met and you see your children as somebody that is taking time from you? Is it because you had a less than perfect childhood and you're afraid that's going to pass on to them? It's very personal, so, but I think it's the biggest part is like knowing that it's not about your children. That resistance that you feel is probably, it's about yourself. And it's not easy to go down that route sometimes. People, for whatever, we tend to cope and survive the way we need to sometimes, so I understand it's not feasible for everyone, but if you want to do the hard work, if you want to grow, and if you want to let that go, it's a great invitation for you to like just reflect on that.
How did that shift in you?
It's just, I mean, it was just beautiful, but it was hard though, because I was like, I would get upset about, a behavior, and then, for example, and I go back to the gaming because I think that's one of my biggest growths, and like my son was working through a game and we were in the car and I'm like, no video games in the car. And he was like, but why? And I'm like, oh, that's such a great question. I don't know. Can you let me? But I knew that I knew that he was bothering me, right? I knew enough to know that I was like very, very like upset about it. So as we were driving, I said, let me think about this for a second, and I'll come back to you. And then I realized that the reason why I was bothered by it was because I was worried what other people on the side of my car who I did not know, I was worried that they would see me as a mom who let their kids play video games in the car. And I was ignoring at that point that my son was getting ready to accomplish a milestone in this Zelda game, which requires a lot of like searching and stuff I don't understand, right? But it was his progress. It was his accomplishment. And I was taking that away from him because I was worried what other people would think of me as a mom who let their son play video games. But if it had been that my son wanted to read a book in the car, I would have been like, oh yeah, look at me. My son likes to read in the car. How do you like that? So at that point I was like, it's the ego of how that made me feel and how that would make me look in front of other people. So I had to let that go.
Ouch, Julieta, you really do deconstruct it very honestly.
Yeah, I was like, of course I would have been happy if my son had a book, right? If he is walking around with a book, because that's the way as society we have learned that education is like, right? Like that's the way you educate yourself and you leave everything else out. If you don't have a book in your hand, if you haven't gone to school, or if you hadn't, a graduate program, I went through university later in life because I wanted that accomplishment too. And obviously I had a lot of fun because it was later, so I got to choose my work. But, I don't work in that field, right? It does help me, I graduated, it's like Romance languages and literature, Spanish and Portuguese, and Latin American and Caribbean studies. So it does help me, but it's not who I am. You know what I mean? So I was like, ugh. And now sometimes when I'll say something, it's bothered me, I'll say, just hold on a second, I don't know why. And then my son will say, well, take a shovel because you got to dig deep there. So, yeah, so he'll just say, because we have learned to know, he has been so patient with me, knowing that I'm a person and I had a lot of stuff to work through, and I have said and I have apologized in the past because some of the things, I was just rude, I'm like, enough with the iPad, or enough with this, or, coming from that, I was just not in the right place though. But I can see why that happens. But, I can pause now and be like, oh, this isn't about him. This is me.
Yeah. And when it reminds me of how you spoke at the beginning, you chose connection.
Yeah.
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 He could have had the book,
Yeah.
and you would have been disconnected.
Totally.
But
And then,
it might have looked like a perfect scene. But
yeah, it's not, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be, And then one day they will be asked, and I read that somewhere a long time ago. One day your kids will ask, they will be asked, so you were homeschooled or unschooled. What was that like? Right. And as a parent, I don't want it to cause any more harm than if he was at school and something happened, right? So I had to really make the decision, because from early on, that was the one things that I let go, that I wasn't a teacher. I wasn't his teacher per se. I was a facilitator of walking this path of life alongside him, and just being there for him. But yeah, connection is like, it was important, but it wasn't easy to get there. Oh.
And the unschooling actually throws you in at the deep end, does it? Because these things come up more often. You really have to, like your son said, get the shovel out a lot more.
Yes, because everything it's about sleep, and it's about sleep, like when you go into, so it's unschooling is about the, without the curriculum of education, without the curriculum, right? It's just learning through life. And then you start seeing things, like about the sleeping patterns. My husband has the need to sleep, to go to sleep early, but my son's like, well, I'm not tired. And then we have to kind of work through that. Sometimes my husband's like, well, I'm not comfortable with you staying up and your mom's not home. And sometimes when I get home from work, we stay up together. But then we talk about the body. You have to listen to your body. If your body's telling you you're tired, listen to it, right? So it's uncomfortable for us to know that, sometimes we don't go to bed until like midnight, right? And I'm like, oh, what would people say? So you're like, oh, so you kind of start thinking about that, and you're like, but it's our connection, it's our world, and it's his way of learning his own body, right? His own body for food, what he needs, because oftentimes that gets taken from us when they say it is time for you to go to bed, and then you don't get to learn your limits, because you've always been told that it is time to go to bed. But that's still shaky, sometimes if I'm around people that, that perhaps do not follow the philosophy, or they're not aware of it, they'll say something and then I can feel it, right? I can feel start getting a little tense and be like, oh, but then I just kind of like pause, just let it go, and yeah. It's beautiful if you're ready to do that.
So what do you think what do you hope they will say in the future? Oh, so you didn't go to school. How was that for you?
I would hope they say it was awesome and it was crazy. My mom was crazy. I'd hope they say, like, we had some of the best times, and I got to see a lot of places. I got to be with my parents, and that's really it, though. I think what I hope for them is for them to find what they love, because I feel like as an adult, I was always searching for that, right? I was always searching for what I was good at, for what I wanted to pour my passion into. And so I hope that with the time that we have for them to explore different options, that one will lead to something else, and then they will find what they love. And it doesn't have to be one thing. It's okay to have to love more than one thing, and it's okay to follow your passion for a minute and then let go of that. So I hope they do that, and find their way in into joy, into being happy for real.
So maybe this connection with the family, these stronger roots, is also something that fosters finding the connection to yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Hearing your own inner voice better.
Yeah, because we're all born with it. Or at least that's what I believe. I think we're all born with our inner voice. But, then as we start growing, we are told that that's not the way you should do it. That's not the way you should climb this tree. That's not the way you should solve this problem. That's not the way. So we
Well, yeah,
listen to the outside
30 inner
voices.
voices in a school must be in
Yeah.
a class must be a nuisance.
Yeah, and they everybody has their own opinion, and everybody, we have all these experts. It's like when you become a new mom, and you have all these experts telling you, every 2 hours, feed every 2.5, and then
Yeah.
we don't listen to our own inner voice, our own child, that they may need food every hour, perhaps, or every 2 hours, right? And so and then once we are adults and we're able to have our own money and create time for ourselves and carve that space that we so need, then we start doing that. We start developing our passion, going back to our passions, right? What we had before. And then we're like, oh, I love this. And then all of a sudden, like people change careers and they become artists, or they change their life because they're finally listening to their inner voice. So I just hope that inner voice stays active, loud, and just there. So I guess it's just like a flame. I had a friend, she would call herself, she was a guardian of the flame.
Well, that's powerful
Yeah. Yeah.
and courageous.
It is
Yeah.
very, very courageous path.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Some states, put, if you think about it now, are like, oh, she's like connecting and having all this time and space. And then like, oh, she doesn't live in the real world. No, we live in the real world too, because there are lots of some states, and I don't know what the UK is for, I know like France doesn't have room for homeschooling. There's like a law against it, I believe.
Yeah, the UK does, yeah. But
Yeah.
like Germany doesn't.
Germany doesn't. So it's a very restricted. So we definitely work within the constraints that we are given, right? In the state of Michigan, you are allowed to homeschool. And like I said, unschooling is usually considered a modality of homeschooling. So we don't have to present a portfolio but the state of Ohio does. You have to register in the state of North Carolina to be a homeschooler family. And some places, like I think California, requires like standardized testing. So we have Michigan. There's a lot politically happening. I think it's a little easier, to navigate this path within the constraints of the law. So we abide by it. We do, like I said, all the subjects. That's the requirement. So they're covered. I can guarantee you they're covered on a daily basis. On a daily basis, because of the conversations that we have. Finding community, it's important, and I think it takes a little bit of more time, because not because you're a homeschooler or you're an unschooler, all of a sudden you connect. So, and I think it's everything. When we were in school, we had friends, but we didn't really have the connections. It was really weird. So I know for us, we have had deeper friendships since we started this journey than when we were in school. But I know sometimes, and I hear a lot about it, it's like, it takes time, but don't give up, because you will find your people. You will totally find them. And once you find them, it's like the coolest thing, because you can bounce ideas and tips and discoveries from each other. And I think that's very, very cool.
That's amazing. Last question. What's something that you personally do for play, for no work, no outcome, something that's just for you, that's your emotional playground?
Oh my goodness. Go into the woods and just sit it. And it really is like, that's emotional. I need grounding a lot. So I often just take off and just go into the woods. I'm very lucky. There's a few places near me that I just go in there and I just kind of like sit for a moment, and it's my emotional like recharge, I love the trees. I love nature. And that's definitely an emotional recharge that I need every now and then.
Great. Well, thank
That's
you.
so
Thank you
great.
so much for coming and chatting. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Julieta.
Great to hear what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys, and thank you for giving me the space to share the philosophy. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Julieta. It's precious.
Thank you.
And please follow our page, The Caring Instinct, on Facebook and Instagram for clips, for announcements of more podcasts, for our own projects that we're working on and posting, and follow the Unschooling Lifestyle.
Yes, thank
Right?
you.
Julieta's page that we will post in the description of the podcast. And thank you very much.